Elizabeth Ann Smart was kidnapped at age 14 on June 5, 2002, by Brian David Mitchell from her home in the Federal Heights neighborhood of Salt Lake City, Utah. She was held captive by Mitchell and his wife, Wanda Barzee, on the outskirts of Salt Lake City, and later, in San Diego County, California. Her captivity lasted approximately 9 months before she was discovered in Sandy, Utah, approximately 18 miles from her home. Smart was abducted from her home at knife point by Mitchell, while her younger sister, Mary Katherine, pretended to be asleep. Mitchell, who claimed to be a religious preacher, held Smart at a camp in the woods with Barzee, where he repeatedly raped her. During her captivity, Smart accompanied her captors in public on various occasions dressed head to toe in white robes and went largely unrecognized by those she came in contact with. Since her abduction and rescue, Smart has become an advocate for missing persons and victims of sexual assault. Barzee was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison in 2010 for her role in the kidnapping and abduction, although she was granted early release on September 19, 2018 for previously uncredited time served. 3. Mitchell was diagnosed by forensic psychologists as having antisocial and narcissistic personality disorder. Extensive disputes over his competence to stand trial lasted several years before he was deemed mentally capable in 2010. Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2011. One of Smart's abductors, Brian David Mitchell, was born on October 18, 1953, in Salt Lake City, Utah, the third of 6 children in a Mormon family. His mother was a teacher and his father was a social worker. In order to teach Mitchell about sex, his father reportedly showed his adolescent son explicit photos from a medical journal, and, in order to teach him about independence, he would drive Mitchell to unfamiliar parts of Salt Lake City, and drop him off, leaving him to find his way home. At age 16, Mitchell exposed himself to a child, and was sent to a juvenile hall. At 19, he married and had 2 children with Karen Minor, who was 3 years younger than he, making her 16 years old at the time of their marriage. After their divorce, Minor was awarded custody of both children, after which Mitchell temporarily fled with the children to New Hampshire. He resided in New Hampshire for 2 years, where he joined a Hare Krishna commune. Mitchell had a history of drug and alcohol abuse in his adult life. Upon returning to Salt Lake City, he was inspired to seek sobriety by his brother, who had recently returned from a mission. In Salt Lake City, Mitchell had 2 additional children with his second wife, Debbie, who herself had 3 children from a previous marriage. Debbie alleged that Mitchell was abusive during their marriage, and they divorced in 1984. After their separation, Debbie alleged that Mitchell had sexually abused their 3-year-old son. The claim could not be medically confirmed, but Mitchell's future visitations with his children were ordered to be supervised by the Division of Child and Family Services. One of Debbie's daughters from her previous marriage would later claim that Mitchell had sexually abused her for 4 years. On the day Mitchell and Debbie's divorce was finalized, he married Wanda Barzee, a then 40-year-old divorcee with 6 children. Barzee had a troubled relationship with her children. One of her daughters would later refer to her as a monster, and she also claimed that when she was a child, Wanda fed her pet rabbit to her for dinner. Together, Mitchell and Barzee were actively involved in the LDS Church. Eventually Mitchell began going by the name Emmanuel, claiming to be a prophet of God who experienced prophetic visions. For this, he was excommunicated from the church. Barzee began going by the name Hephzibah, and the two would panhandle and preach in downtown Salt Lake City. Mitchell presented himself in an image that was akin to the image of Jesus, dressing in white robes and tunics, and growing a beard. In the early hours of June 5, 2002, Mitchell broke into the home of Edward and Lois Smart in the Federal Heights neighborhood of Salt Lake City, where they lived with their 6 children. He abducted 14-year-old Elizabeth from the bedroom she shared with her 9-year-old sister, Mary Katherine, who was awakened but pretended to be asleep. When she thought Elizabeth and the abductor had gone, Mary Katherine attempted to go to her parents' bedroom, but only narrowly avoided being seen by Mitchell and Elizabeth, who were outside the bedroom of the family's boys. She crept back into her bed, where she hid for an undetermined time, possibly over 2 hours. Just before 4 a.m., Mary Katherine woke her parents and told them what had happened. Thinking she had been dreaming, they did not believe her until they found a window screen that had been cut with a knife. On June 6, 2002, Ed and Lois went on television and pleaded for the kidnapper to return their daughter. A massive regional search effort, organized by the Laura Recovery Center, involved up to 2,000 volunteers each day, as well as dogs and planes. Various websites carried flyers that could be printed or circulated via internet. After many days of intensive searching, the community-led search was ended and efforts were directed to other means of finding Elizabeth. Mary Katherine's observations were of little use, and there was little usable evidence found at the scene such as fingerprints or DNA. A search using bloodhounds was unsuccessful. Police questioned and interviewed hundreds of potential suspects, including a 26-year-old who was cleared after being located in a West Virginia hospital. The investigation had the side effect of returning several at-large criminals to prison, but Elizabeth was not found. The Salt Lake City police considered Richard Ricci a person of interest early in the investigation. Ricci was a handyman with a history of drug abuse who had worked for the Smarts. He had been jailed on an unrelated parole violation prior. Ricci died of a brain hemorrhage in August 2002. To keep Elizabeth's name in the press, her family used a variety of strategies, including making a website about her abduction and providing home videos. After her kidnapping, Smart was taken by Mitchell into the woods to an encampment outside of Salt Lake City, where she was met by Wanda Barzee. According to Smart's testimony, Barzee eventually just proceeded to wash my feet and told me to change out of my pajamas into a robe type of garment. And when I refused, she said if I didn't, she would have Brian Mitchell come rip my pajamas off. I put the robe on. He came and performed the ceremony, which was to marry me to him. After that, he proceeded to rape me. Mitchell claimed to be an angel, and he also told Smart that he was a Davidic king who would emerge in 7 years, be stoned by a mob, lie dead in the streets for 3 days and then rise up and kill the Antichrist. Smart, he insisted, was the first of many virgin brides he planned to kidnap, each of whom would accompany him as he battled the Antichrist. To keep Smart from escaping, she was shackled to a tree with a metal cable, which allowed her limited mobility outside of the tent she occupied during her captivity. She was forced to take a new name, and she chose the name Esther, after Esther of the Old Testament. It was later revealed during court testimony that Mitchell repeatedly raped Smart, sometimes multiple times a day, forced her to look at pornographic magazines, and regularly threatened to kill her. He often forced her to drink alcohol and take drugs to lower her resistance, and both starved her and fed her garbage. Smart's abuse was facilitated with the assistance of Barzee, whom Smart would later refer to as the most evil woman she had ever met. The Salt Lake City Public Library building, one of several public locations where Smart accompanied her captors, Mitchell and Barzee in public on numerous occasions, but her presence was either obscured or unnoticed via various methods of concealment, which often consisted of her wearing a headscarf and a face veil. In August 2002, around 2 months after Smart's kidnapping, Mitchell devised a plan to leave Salt Lake City with Barzee and Smart, possibly to Boston or New York City, to research potential places to relocate. Mitchell and Barzee visited the Salt Lake City Public Library with Smart. There, they were noticed by a library patron due to their unusual styles of dress. Each wore full-length robes with veils which concealed most of their faces. The patron was convinced to call police after looking closely at Smart's eyes. A police detective arrived at the library and confronted Mitchell, Barzee, and Smart. However, he was deterred by Mitchell, who claimed that Smart was his daughter, named Augustine Marshall, and they were unable to remove their veils or garb on religious grounds. When questioned by the detective, neither Barzee nor Smart spoke, and Mitchell stated that their religion prohibited women from speaking in public. Smart would later say that Barzee signaled her not to move, and she gripped her legs under the table. She later recalled the incident. I felt like hope was walking out the door. I was mad at myself that I didn't say anything, mad at myself for not taking the chance. So close. I felt terrible that the detective hadn't pushed harder. He just walked away. Smart also visited grocery stores and a restaurant but went unnoticed. In the fall of 2002, she attended a party with Mitchell and Barzee and was photographed wearing a veil and robe with Mitchell and another party guest. In September 2002, Mitchell and Barzee left Salt Lake City with Smart, relocating to San Diego County, California, where they held Smart in an encampment in a dry creek bed in Lakeside. Mitchell and Barzee relocated with Smart several times to different encampments in San Diego County, often moving in the middle of the night. On February 12, 2003, Mitchell was arrested in El Cajon for breaking into a church and spent several days in jail over the incident. In October 2002, Smart's sister Mary Katherine suddenly realized that the abductor's voice was that of an unemployed man the family knew as Emmanuel, whom the family had hired for a day to work on the roof and rake leaves. The police were skeptical because of the short time Emmanuel had worked for the family, the long time that elapsed, and the short time Mary Katherine had heard the abductor's voice. However, the family had a sketch artist draw Emmanuel's face from their descriptions, and in February this drawing was released to the media. It was shown on Larry King Live and America's Most Wanted. The drawing was recognized by relatives of Mitchell, who gave police contemporary photographs of him. On March 12, 2003, Mitchell was spotted with a woman and a girl in Sandy, Utah, by two separate couples who had seen photos of Mitchell on the news. The woman was Wanda Barzee, and the girl was Elizabeth Smart, disguised in a gray wig, sunglasses, and veil. Both couples reported their recognition of Mitchell to the Sandy Police Department, which immediately dispatched police officers to the location. Smart was recognized during questioning by the officers, who then rescued her and arrested Mitchell and Barzee. 1 month after the recovery of Elizabeth Smart, the state of Utah superseded the then-existing Rachel Alert with the nationwide Amber Alert Child Abduction Alert System, in part to conform with recently implemented nationwide procedures. Although the Rachel Alert was superseded,
in her second day of testimony, Elizabeth Smart described in graphic detail what she says her alleged abductor Brian David Mitchell did to her,
based on his
plying
claims of
her
being
with
a
drugs and
religious
alcohol,
prophet.
forcing her to
While
walk
awaiting
around
the
naked,
evaluation,
and raping
Mitchell was
her on a daily
incarcerated at the
basis.
Utah State
This
Hospital.
is not a prosecutor
Stephen Golding,
making
a
an
psychologist
argument. This
hired
is
by
the
the
victim
defense,
looking
distinguished
at the
between
jurors,
zealous belief
telling
and
them in her
delusion,
own
and
words
concluded
the
that Mitchell's
nightmare
beliefs
that she had to
transcended zeal and
endure
were in
for
fact
months.
delusional. It
Very
was Golding's
powerful.
opinion that
She's
Mitchell
now
was not
23,
competent
but
to
Smart
stand
was just
trial as a result
14
of his
when she was
delusions.
snatched from
The
her
court,
bed and
however,
held for
overruled
9
Golding's
months.
opinion and found Mitchell to be
Authorities
competent in
frantically searched
2004.
for her, but
58.
Smart says they missed an
Negotiations
opportunity to
subsequently
rescue
began
her.
between the
Mitchell
defense
made
and the
her wear a veil in
prosecution. The
public, and
defendant
she
was
says the
willing to plead
detective once
guilty to
approached them,
kidnapping and burglary
asking
for a
if he
10
could
to
look under her
15-year
veil.
sentence on
He
condition
said he
that
was
Smart
looking
should
for
not
Elizabeth
testify.
Smart.
The
He asked if he could
prosecution
be part of
refused
our
to drop
religion for a
sexual
day,
assault
just
charges
so he
against
could see
Mitchell,
my
and no
face.
agreement was reached.
Mitchell told the
58.
detective
On
no.
October
Smart
15,
says she remained silent,
2004, plea
fearing for her
negotiations
life.
had still not
I
determined
felt
an
like
agreement.
hope was
The
walking out the
defense
door.
appealed as late
I
as
was mad at
October
myself that I
21st,
didn't say
asking the
anything.
prosecution
I
to
felt
rethink their
terrible that the
position in terms
detective
of what
hadn't
they were
pushed
offering
harder,
Mitchell.
that he
Up
had
until
just
this
walked
point, the
away.
defense did not
During her
highlight
testimony,
breakdown in
Smart did not
competence
have
as a
to face
contributing
Mitchell.
factor
He
to the
was removed from the
deterioration of plea
courtroom for singing
negotiations.
hymns.
They cited
Mitchell
the lack
claims
of
to
a
hear the
coming to
voice
an
of
agreement
God,
as being the
but
result
Smart
of the
says
sole
while he was
discretion of
abusing
their
her,
client.
he
The
never
appeal was
referred to
subsequently
religion.
rejected.
The prosecutor
Jennifer
saying
Steen, a
he's not a
psychologist
religious
who
zealot.
initially stated
He
that
is a
Mitchell was
sexual
competent,
predator who
interviewed
preyed
Mitchell
on this
again for the
child
defense's
and was
request in
using
February
religion to
2005.
manipulate
After
her.
this
Even
interview,
after Smart
Heidi
was finally
Bucci,
rescued,
Mitchell's
she
attorney,
initially wouldn't
filed a
tell
brief
police who she
stating that
was,
Mitchell was no
fearing
longer
Mitchell would kill
competent
her.
to stand
He now
trial.
faces
Mitchell
life in prison if
subsequently began
convicted.
to act out in
Ben
court,
Tracy,
while
CBS.
jail staff observed no change in his behavior and thought process. Ultimately, Judge Judy Atherton agreed with the defense, asserting that Mitchell's behavior reflected psychosis. The defendant re-entered Utah State Hospital on August 11, 2005, and remained there until 2008. While he was in the hospital, no staff members observed Mitchell being paranoid in a pathological sense. In February 2006, a bill went before the Utah legislature to allow prosecutors to apply for forcible medication on defendants to restore their competence to face trial. Permission to forcibly medicate Wanda Barzee was also sought, relying upon the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Sell v. United States, which permits compulsory medication when the state can demonstrate a compelling interest is served by restoring a person's competence and that medication would not harm the person or prevent him from defending himself. In June 2006, a Utah judge approved the forcible medication of Barzee so that she could stand trial. On December 18, 2006, Mitchell was again declared unfit to stand trial in the Utah state courts after screaming at a judge during a hearing to forsake those robes and kneel in the dust. Doctors had been trying to treat Mitchell without drugs, but prosecutor Kent Morgan said after the scene in court that a request was likely to be made for permission to forcibly administer drugs. On December 12, 2008, it was reported that Mitchell could not legally be forcibly medicated by the state of Utah to attempt to restore his mental competency, also claiming that it is unnecessary and needlessly harsh, and therefore a violation of the Utah state constitution, to prolong trial proceedings to this length. The case was eventually transferred to federal court on October 10, 2008. Issues of competency proved to be the crux of the case, and the court held an evidentiary hearing on Mitchell's competency on October 1, 2009, and November 30 through December 11, 2009. On one occasion during a hearing in October, it was reported that Mitchell burst out singing hymns in court. During one of these hearings, Smart described Mitchell as smart, articulate, evil, wicked, manipulative, sneaky, slimy, selfish, greedy, not spiritual, not religious, not close to God. Competency evaluations conducted by Noel Gardner, Michael Wellner and Richard Demir were presented at the hearing. Gardner maintained that he believed Mitchell was fully aware of his actions and was attempting to deceive the court. Wellner, another witness in the case, reviewed 210 sources and 57 separate interviews including Mitchell, his wife Wanda Barzee, his family, and Elizabeth Smart. The court credited Wellner with presenting a 206-page report. Wellner opined that Mitchell was competent to stand trial, and diagnosed him with non-exclusive pedophilia, antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, malingering and alcohol abuse in a controlled environment. Wellner believed that Mitchell was highly manipulative and used his religious expression as a way to coax people into overlooking his high function and dismissing him as delusional. Experts for the defense, including Dr. Demir, a clinical psychologist, did not dispute these diagnoses. They maintained he had a concurrent fixed delusional disorder, believing that Mitchell was mentally ill at the time of the crime, and this greatly impaired his judgment. Mitchell was deemed competent to stand trial on March 1, 2010. Prosecution and sentencing Wanda Barzee eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to concurrent terms of 15 years in state and federal prison. However, due to the delays in mental evaluations, it took Mitchell's case almost 8 years to come to court. Mitchell's trial began on November 8, 2010. The defense acknowledged that Mitchell was responsible for the crimes, but contended that he was legally insane at the time of the crime, and should therefore be found not guilty by reason of insanity. The insanity defense for Mitchell was rejected on December 11, 2010, when the jury found him guilty of kidnapping and transporting a minor across state lines with intent to engage in sexual activity. 64. U.S. District Judge Dale A. Kimball sentenced Mitchell to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Mitchell is currently serving his sentence at U.S. Penitentiary, Terre Haute, a high-security federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. In 2016, Barzee's federal imprisonment was terminated and she was transferred from the Federal Medical Center, Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas, to the Utah State Prison in Draper, Utah, to begin serving her state prison sentence. She was released in September 2018, which Smart protested.